Hey friends, I'm Greg Nettle and I serve as president of Stadia Church Planting, where we want to help you start thriving, growing, multiplying churches for the next generation. On this episode of the Church Planting Podcast, I have a dear friend, colleague, mentor, coach, name it what you will. Just an amazing guest on this episode. John Ortberg is the leader of Become New, which is a ministry devoted to helping you grow spiritually one day at a time. John is incredibly well-known, nationally known speaker, author of many, many books. One of my favorites is The Life You've Always Wanted. On this episode of the Church Planting Podcast, we're going to be talking to John about his latest book called Steps, A Guide to Transforming Your Life. Well, everyone, welcome to the Church Planting Podcast. I've been so excited about this episode because I have a dear friend, a mentor, a colleague, John Ortberg. Welcome to the Church Planting Podcast.
Greg, I put you in all those same categories too. So thank you. It's always fun. Anytime we get a chance to talk, there's always going to be a lot of energy and a lot of learning. So I'm grateful to do it.
Yeah, I love our conversations. John, I also love your books. And over here, I can't show them all right now, but I think I have every one of the books you've ever written on my shelves over here. I've read them, some of them multiple times, taught through them. But you have more recently released a newer book called Steps, and it's subtitled A Guide to Transforming Your Life When Willpower Isn't Enough. And I wanted to talk about that because I think all of our church planters, all of our multiplying leaders, business people, everyone needs to read this book. But interestingly enough, you know, it has to do a lot with the framework of Alcoholics Anonymous, 12 steps. And I mean, we all think about the big addictions, alcoholism, drug addiction, sex addiction, but this book is really written for everyone. Can you talk about why that is?
Yeah. Yes. This is not a quote unquote recovery book. It's just a discipleship book. And first, in thinking about addiction, addiction is a tricky category, and it's probably kind of a spectrum or a continuum. So all of us get attached to stuff, whether or not we think that we have an identified addiction. I depend on my work. I depend on approval from other people. Philip Yancey said that what the Old Testament called idolatry is what we call addiction. And so we all get attached to stuff in ways that we're no longer able to control with our willpower. So I believe that's deeply true. And to identify, name those things, ask God for help is terrifically important. Even beyond that, the relationship between sin and addiction is a deep, multi-layered issue. Neil Flanagan's got a wonderful book on sin, Not the Way It's Supposed to Be.
Yeah, I've read that.
A whole chapter on what he calls the tragedy of addiction. And he talks about addiction and sin as an overlapping category. But what particularly interested me about the 12 steps, even beyond the definition of addiction and the role that it plays in human life, is that a lot of people don't realize this. The way that the 12 steps emerged, they really were discovered. They were not invented. Is this guy, Bill W., who was a hopeless drunk, in and out of jail, lost jobs, lost money, lost friends. His doctor told his wife, Lois, you have three choices. You can have him locked up. You can watch him go crazy. You can let him die. And then he had a friend named Ebby T, knocked at his door one day. Ebby had been a drunk, found God, and tells Bill W., I found God. Bill ends up having a profound experience with Christ in a detox hospital ward and gets involved in a discipleship ministry called the Oxford Group.
Yep.
The Oxford Group was just an attempt, started by a Lutheran pastor, Frank Buckman, to recapture the practice of discipleship in the contemporary era. In fact, it was initially known as a first century Christian fellowship. And so Bill W. began to practice what they did there, a life of surrender, fearless and searching moral inventory, deep confession to another person, searching for guidance, reading scripture, seeking to live a life of service, making amends to others, and discovered as he did those things, the power to live a sober life and be freed from addiction got thrown in as kind of a byproduct. And then Dr. Bob came along, and for the first 4 years, there's no 12 steps, there's no big book, there's no AA meeting, there's just the discipleship of the Oxford Group. And eventually about 100 alcoholics are living sober lives. And so at the end of those 4 years, they say to Bill W., we got to share this with other people. Millions of people are died. You got to write this stuff down. That's when the big book got written and the 12 steps got codified. But they worked first. For anybody who's at a church, we're all trying to figure out concretely, what does discipleship look like? And a lot of stuff's being written about a discipleship pathway or a rule of life, or how do you get something that's not random, that's not arbitrary, it's not legalistic, but you can really experience life change through it. One of the striking aspects of the 12 steps, if people read through them, is the verbs are all in the past tense. So we admitted that we were powerless over alcohol, put in whatever word you want to, and our lives had become unmanageable. We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. We decided to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. They're all in the past tense because the steps worked first, and then they got codified. It's not hard for a pastor or church group to go in and say, spend this many days in solitude, read the Bible this much, serve this much. But those things tend to be kind of random, not necessarily organic. What's striking in AA is, to me, it's very much like when God says, my strength is made perfect in weakness. It's precisely the weakness of addiction that drove this desperate need for God. In AA, they'll talk about the gift of desperation, G-O-D. And that desperate need, in a strange way, became kind of the compass needle that would point towards true north. This is the way of discipleship through which power from God can come to enable us to do what our wills can't do. And that's what's most interesting to me is, what's the way of discipleship, the way of following Jesus that's actionable, through which we can receive transforming power. And I think AA has become this wonderful paradoxical gift to the church in our day.
Okay, so I remember this like it was yesterday, although it was many years ago. I'm doing a baby dedication as the senior pastor at River Tree. We do them once a year, twice a year, and we have all of these. Typically, some single parents, but most often it was couples up in front of the church committing their children to raising their children in a godly home. And I'll never forget, I'm walking down the line, I'm praying for these babies and young children, and there's a guy that stands there, and honestly, he is reeking of alcohol at 9 a.m, right? And so, my first thought is, oh man, that's not a good sign. And then I come to the next guy, and I know him really well, and I remember thinking, oh man, this guy, he's just not a nice guy. And, he really struggles with any kind of generosity, right? Just kind of stingy. And, and then I think about myself and my, just to be real candid, I'm an Enneagram 3, and just kind of built into me. And then the sinful nature I can give into is this need for approval addiction that I have to struggle with. Is that you too? Okay. And, so I'm thinking about this book, and I'm going, I don't want to, AA gets pigeonholed into alcoholism and that, but what are some of the other, like the stinginess or my need for approval?
Right.
This is a much broader topic. And so how does the book apply to the broader Christian community and what we're dealing with?
Yep. So, one of the guys that I was talking to when I first began to study in preparation for this book, it's been a lifelong interest, but especially the last 10 years or so. One of the guys I talked to, who'd been in AA for a couple of decades, said, I predict that before you've been studying this very long, you will be jealous that you are not an alcoholic.
Wow.
And I came to understand what he means, because what will happen for a lot of people that are alcoholics, they get in the program, they're really working the program. And program is another word for discipleship. It's just what's a non-legalistic, but concrete, actionable way of life where you can actually be doing it or not.
And bring about transformation. And
this guy said, the main problem in churches is that we have a wimpy step one. Step one is admitted that we were desperate, that we were, our lives had become unmanageable, and that we were powerless. And the blessing that people with identified addictions have is their powerlessness is clear to them. And so they will be desperately urgent to pursue a way of life that has intensity. And that urgency is not because they're more spiritual. It's just because it's clear to them, my choices are follow the program or I'm going to die.
Yeah, lose everything.
Most of us in the church, our problem is, I think, but it's an illusion, that my life is manageable, that I can manage my ego, I can manage my arrogance, I can manage my approval addiction.
My need for love. Yeah.
And then we all live lives that are so far beneath the kingdom, but we just get used to it, and we think it's okay, and we think it's acceptable, and we become blind. We live in denial, how much it hurts other people, how much other people can sense it, the gap between what I actually live and who I actually could be. And so I actually think one of the main problems in the church is, how do we help people take a really robust step one? And I've been thinking about this a lot, Greg. It's very interesting when you look particularly at the life of Jesus, his encounters and his stories. Very often they contrast somebody who's taken a real robust step one with somebody who has a wimpy step one. So the prodigal son, real robust step, comes to himself, eating the pig trough. I got an elder brother, wimpy step one. The Pharisee and the tax collector, very robust step one, won't even look up to heaven. Tax collector, I'm doing pretty good. My life's pretty manageable. I'm not very powerless. At Simon, the Pharisee's house, the sinful woman versus Simon. Just over and over, you see people with a pretty wimpy step one have a hard time really wanting Jesus, and people with a real robust one. So I think for those of us in churches, one of the places where it starts is, how do we help people genuinely see in an unforced way, I desperately need God. And again, I think for pastors at churches, because this is a way of life is so needed, it's very striking to me that it's not just addicts. Almost anybody in a deeply desperate situation will begin to pursue this. The practices themselves are not rocket science. So you go through the 12 steps, a fearless and searching moral inventory, confess to God ourselves and one other person.
Sounds pretty biblical.
Ask God to remove our defects of character, make a list of persons that we'd harmed, and then make amends to them. Begin to put these practices into our lives on a daily basis. Seek through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, carry the message to others. It ain't rocket science. It's the desperation that makes people pursue those practices with intensity that brings power. And I was just telling you before we started recording this, I just got back late last night from being at Angola prison. Now, prison is another place where when guys are there and they're facing a life sentence, there tends to be a real clear choice. I can follow Jesus, or if I go a different path, so there's an intensity that's there. I mean, you're working with church plants in places where the church is persecuted. They tend to follow Jesus with an intensity. I was in Ethiopia when it was under Marxist rule. So, you're risking your life to be part of the church. That's an intense experience. Somebody gets a terminal disease, often in communities that are experiencing deep oppression or deeply under-resourced. It is most often people who are seeking to follow Jesus in situations that bring unforced desperation that most deeply experience the power that comes from that way.
John, and it's also built around this. It's we, right? And can you talk about the need to do discipleship in the context of grace-filled relationships?
Yeah. So as you'll know, there's just 1,000 statements out of those kind of communities that are real sticky because it's life or death. So it's like they got to make the message real and accessible and memorable for folks. And one of them is, I get drunk, but we get sober. And so in they'll talk about really there's two ingredients that are needed from a human level: a program, that's discipleship, that's a way, and then a fellowship. We are a fellowship, so we have to meet together. 90 meetings in 90 days. You first begin to pursue sobriety. You just keep getting together with folks. You get a sponsor. Well, really, if you think about how did our whole movement begin, the initial program was Torah, and the initial fellowship was Israel. And then Jesus comes along, and now the program is his teaching, Sermon on the Mount, and the fellowship are his disciples. And then you get to Acts 2, and now they met together daily. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to prayer, to the breaking of bread. That's the program, and this is the fellowship. So I can't do it. We can't do it on our own. We need to gather together with other people. And
hey, John, hold on. Our internet just went down for some reason.
That's just called "Why Can't Church Be More Like AA?"
Criminy.
By a guy named Stephen Haynes. And very often when a pastor or church leader goes to an AA meeting, there's a raw honesty there, and they'll come back and say, how come church can't be more like that? And I think the basic answer is it can, as long as people who attend church are willing to be more like alcoholics. And again, the gift of desperation is people realize, I got to come clean. I got to tell it all. I got to let people know what my real story is and not hide anymore. So another one of those little sayings in AA that's very convicting to me as a pastor is AA groups very often meet in churches because that's where they were born, but not in a sanctuary, not in a beautiful auditorium, not in a really nice room, because they're messy people. They drink stale coffee and eat, crummy cookies and smoke cigarettes. So they meet in the basement. And they will sometimes say, when you go to a church, you can either go upstairs and hear about miracles, or you can come downstairs and experience them and see them. And so for all of the women and men who are planning churches that you are working with to say, we want to be a basement church. We want to be a place where people can actually experience the miraculous power of God to change lives. But precisely to your point, that can only happen in genuine community. And what's needed there is the courage, the vulnerability, the encouragement, the freedom. Only God can bring this power for the breakthrough that happens when people get real. And another really good book on this whole subject is called Addiction and Virtue. And it's by a Christian philosopher, Kent Dunnington. And Kent talks about how at an AA meeting, I'll start by saying, my name's John, I'm an alcoholic, or whatever kind of holic I am. And then everybody just says, hi, John. And he says, what they recognize in AA that churches generally don't is that the recognition and public confession of personal inadequacy is itself a spiritual achievement that needs to be ritualized and celebrated. So, for me to recognize, not just back when I was not yet a Christian, but this week, today, I am not adequate. And I messed up here and I messed up here. And to have the freedom to actually name that and talk about that, and not to confuse spiritual maturity with human adequacy. The recognition and public confession of personal inadequacy.
Okay, John, we've got a lot of church planners listening to this, a lot of church leaders, mega church leaders, all kinds of partners listening to this. You're not advocating for us to go up to our pulpit on Sunday morning and go, hey, I'm Greg Nettle and I'm a sex addict. Or are you? What's the level? Where do we do this? How do we find this level of...
The correct level of disclosure. And it is, there's reasons why it's so hard in the church. So it's not a simple, easy thing to implement. And it's really important to acknowledge that. I think when it comes to disclosure, to say at a church level, in a church service, there the question is, what do other people need to hear not what do I need to say. So I can't use my congregation as a therapist. I remember a pastor that I know of who years ago, he was having a lot of marital problems, and he was speaking, and what he said to the audience was, I'd give my marriage about a C-, and I don't think it'll ever be any better.
Wow.
Well, that left everybody just carrying this burden, and he ended up getting divorced. That's something you need to tell your therapist. In AA, there will be certain things that you'll tell to everybody in a group where you're at. There'll be some stuff you just tell your sponsor. And so I think in a church setting to say, step 5 is having done a fearless and searching moral inventory, I admit to God, myself, and one other person the exact nature of my wrongs. And I have a guy named Rick in my life where I do that with him. I've done it, and we talk on a pretty much a daily basis. 6:50 in the morning. Here's where I was tempted. Here's where I messed up. So I will tell people about that relationship and encourage everybody. Could be a spiritual friend, could be a pastor, could be a therapist, but somebody where you can tell it all to. And then with the church as a whole, we share as appropriate, not as inappropriate. But I do think stories, to have people tell their story of that are genuinely vulnerable, where I really am messed up, to help us get out of the hiding that just becomes habitual in churches. So both to disclose appropriately, but on a deeper and more regular basis than we normally do. And then also to teach people, how do you find a fully disclosing person in your life where you can have no secrets before someone? Those are huge needs for pastors to be thinking about for their churches.
Okay, let's get real practical now. You're back in your pastor days. You're a church planter, and you're wanting to get discipleship going in your church because we all want to see life transformation. We have this book called Steps by this guy named John Ortberg. How would you implement this if you're just starting out or you're starting something?
Yeah, I would look for people who are really hungry and really motivated. It's very hard to talk to people who don't have a deep sense of desperation around this. So if you have recovery ministries in the church, for sure. When you got people, divorce recovery, something like that. People who, for whatever reason, new Christians, God's really gotten a hold of them. Their sense of vision is really high. Dallas Willard used to talk about the 12 steps quite a lot. And he said, the first 2 steps are really vision steps, where I realized negatively, I'm powerless. Positively, God can restore me to sanity. I make the decision. That's step 3. And then the other steps are about method. So look for people where they're really hungry, and then have them begin to actually practice the steps together. And Celebrate Recovery carves them up a little bit different. So that might be something that would be helpful. But I would get people into groups with each other so that they're not doing it on their own. They're not doing it in isolation. And then have them actually begin to practice the steps. There's a church in Amarillo I was at a month or 2 ago, and they have a class called B12. And that's the Bible and the 12 steps.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, B12. Everybody needs B12. And so it's this class, and it's so funny, Greg, because this is at a church, and they meet on Sunday mornings. But I was preaching at that church, and they invited me to come into their class. You step into that class, and it's like, oh, this is not just a Sunday school class where people are going to, hear a talk and learn about stuff. This is the real deal. And so running experiments with people who are hungry and actually trying, again, because I think the 12 steps are this remarkable gift of a proven pathway of discipleship through which power is available. So running experiments with groups together where they're actually doing this and then seeing how they're learning it, how can that fit your church? I think that's a movement that needs to happen.
So, John, maybe that movement will start or get some seeds here in this podcast. Wouldn't it be great to see, 300 new churches launched in the U.S. this year that have B12 groups?
Yes. Yeah. No, it's when we started doing this stuff, several people said, man, we really want more help. So we had people that said, why don't you film a curriculum? So we put together a curriculum for small groups that might want to go through this. And it's a video curriculum. It's really cool. we found a place that looks like a basement. It was actually built at exactly the same time that AA was getting started. And so the team is working on it. It'll be available for free online. As we're talking about this, it's summer of 2025, and I think sometime this fall it should come online. So that will be there as a resource. There's lots of resources. Ian Cron's a wonderful writer, has a terrific book called The Fix, and it's about exactly the same topic. How do you use the 12 steps for people, whether or not they have an identified addiction? So I think the recognition of the need for this and its power really is kind of a movement that's in its early days, but it's going to grow. And I think for a lot of churches, it's the clear recognition that very often people who are in recovery are experiencing that biggest sense of transformation. And that second guy that was in line when you were, doing the baby thing, where he doesn't reek of alcohol, but he reeks of some stuff. Yeah. And we all reek of some stuff, and we all need it. And then there's this thing over here. So we just got to connect the dots. I do think it's a movement that's going to grow, and I hope it does.
Okay, so Steps, you can get it on Amazon, really any book area. I'm on Amazon right now on my other screen, and the curriculum should come out in the summer of 25, fall of 25.
Yep.
And then, of course, your daily vodcast, which is Become New. And so just Google John Ortberg, Become New, and you can see that and get these daily doses with John, and like I do. And John, always an absolute pleasure to spend time with you, my friend.
Well, I love what you do for all the people out there who are planting churches. You are doing a noble thing. You are doing great work. It is really, really hard work. There's all the spiritual opposition that we face, and then cultural trends that you're bucking. Keep going. Don't be discouraged. Just know it is a delight to God that you would devote yourself to serving the bride of Christ, and I admire you very much.
Thanks for listening to the Church Planting Podcast. The Church Planting Podcast is part of the Stadia Podcast Network. To find more great episodes and to see how Stadia can help you start thriving, growing, multiplying churches for the next generation, be sure to check out stadia.org/podcasts.